There are nights when a result tells you who won, and then there are nights like this, when a result feels like a full argument being settled in public. Barcelona beating Newcastle 7-2 at the Spotify Camp Nou, 8-3 on aggregate, was not just a qualification. It was not just another chaotic Champions League knockout tie. It felt personal. It felt loud. It felt like one of those games where every goal carried a little bit of attitude with it, where every swing and momentum made the stadium breathe differently, and where by the end the scoreline itself was doing the talking for everyone. Because let's be honest, this was supposed to be a test. This was supposed to be the moment where all that noise around the Premier League, all that chest beating, all that talk about strength and depth and impossible intensity would be backed up on the pitch. Instead, Barcelona turned it into a spectacle. A messy one, a thrilling one, a completely unhinged one at times, but still a spectacle that ended with Newcastle overwhelmed, stretched, mentally broken, and staring at a scoreboard that kept getting uglier. And what makes this game so fascinating is that it was not domination from the first whistle to the last. That would almost be too neat, too tidy, too boring for a night like this. This match had panic in it. It had sloppiness. It had moments where Barcelona looked electric and moments where they looked exposed in the most alarming way. It had refereeing debates, defensive disasters, brilliant attacking combinations, and one of those second halves where you can actually feel a team losing belief in real time. Barcelona started like a team convinced the night belonged to them. The opening was sharp, aggressive, purposeful. Lamine Yamal was moving with intention, drifting inside, rotating, refusing to stay fixed in one lane, clearly aware of what happened before, and clearly determined not to be boxed in the same way again. You could see the thought behind it. Newcastle thought they knew where the danger would come from, and Barcelona immediately started changing the picture. That first goal was the perfect expression of it. Lamine Yamal receives the ball centrally, turns brilliantly, slips past his man, and suddenly Newcastle are scrambling. The pass into Fermin Lopez is clever. The awareness from Fermin is even better. And when the ball reaches Raphinha, he does the rest with the calm of a player who knew exactly what the moment needed. One touch to settle himself, one finish into the bottom corner, and just like that, it is 1-0. Camp Nou is alive. Barcelona are flying, and everyone watching is thinking the same thing. This could get out of hand early. But this game refused to follow a simple script, because almost immediately, Barcelona reminded everyone why supporting this team can feel like voluntarily sitting on an unstable chair and pretending it is fine. Newcastle equalized through Anthony Elanga, and the whole thing came from disorder. Eric Garcia did not look right physically, and you could see the lack of sharpness in the positioning. The right side was a problem. The cross came in, Elanga was free at the far post, Joao Cancelo had not checked over his shoulder, and suddenly it was 1-1. Just like that, all the early comfort disappeared. And yet Barcelona responded quickly, which matters. That is the part of this team that deserves real credit. They do not always control chaos, but they do know how to answer it. From a free kick, Raphinha delivered beautifully. Gerard Martin made a really intelligent decision at the back post, and instead of forcing the header at goal, he guided it back into danger where Marc Bernal was waiting. Tap in, 2-1. It was smart, composed, and ruthless in the exact right way. The problem was, Newcastle kept finding the same wound and pressing on it. Barcelona were giving them that right side over and over again. The second Newcastle equalizer came from one of those moments that will drive a coach absolutely mad. Lamine Yamal tried a backheel in his own half when the simple option was sitting right there. The ball was intercepted, Lewis Hall moved it quickly, Harvey Barnes delivered, and there was Elanga again at the far post. Again with too much freedom, again punishing Cancelo's side. 2-2. The game had become wild. And for about 10 minutes after that, Newcastle looked like they had figured something out. Every direct ball toward Elanga, every run in behind, every attack targeting that channel, it all carried danger. Barcelona were not in control. Not emotionally, not structurally, not in the rhythm of the game. Pedri, usually the player who calms the room down without anyone noticing, looked swamped for a stretch. The midfield was not breathing properly. The whole thing felt stretched open. Exactly the sort of match Newcastle would have wanted. That is what made the penalty before halftime so huge, because it did more than change the score. It changed the feeling. Barcelona had already lived through the scare. Newcastle had already shown they could hurt them. And then, just before the break, the pressure swung again. The cross comes in, Trippier brings down Raphinha, and Barcelona get the penalty. Lamine Yamal steps up and converts to make it 3-2. And yes, the refereeing conversation will hover over parts of this game because there was obvious frustration about consistency. There was that earlier incident with Elanga going down under contact, and there will be people arguing one should have been given if the other was. Fine. That debate is part of football now. The tedious little side dish no one asked for, but everyone ends up chewing on. But even if those moments irritated people, they do not explain what happened in the second half. They do not explain 7-2. They do not explain 8-3 on aggregate. At some point, the match outgrew the officiating and became about football again. And in the second half, Barcelona were simply too much. There was a different level of clarity to them after the break. The attacking patterns were cleaner. The movement was more decisive. The passing had purpose again. You could feel the team re-emerge with the kind of focus that says the madness is over now. We know exactly what this night requires. Fermin Lopez made it 4-2 after a gorgeous move, and that goal felt like the hinge of the whole tie. Gerard Martin broke lines with a lovely pass. Raphinha flicked it on first time with real quality, and Fermin finished the move with conviction. At 4-2, Newcastle's heads dropped. You could see it immediately. Not just disappointment, but something heavier than that. The body language changed. The urgency started leaking out of them. The confidence that had fueled their best spell in the first half suddenly looked fragile. It is one thing to chase a game away from home in Europe when you still believe the next punch can hurt the other side. It is another when the stadium is roaring, the opposition are flowing, and every mistake feels like it might become another goal. From there, Barcelona smelled weakness and kept going. Robert Lewandowski scored twice, which on paper looks like a classic center-forward's night, but even that tells only part of the story. His overall performance had rough edges. His link play was not always clean, and there were plenty of moments where he looked off the pace of the sharper attackers around him. But this is the strange thing about great strikers, or at least great strikers in the late chapters of their careers. They can have an awkward game and still leave with numbers. They can frustrate you, then punish you. He did both. Newcastle somehow allowed him too much space, and he took what was offered. Raphinha got the 7th, and honestly, it was fitting that he had the final word because he was the face of this performance. 2 goals, 2 assists, constant work without the ball, leadership in the biggest moments, danger every time Barcelona built with speed. He was not just productive. He felt central to the mood of the game. Whenever Barcelona needed quality, it seemed to run through him. He pressed, he created, he finished, and he carried himself like a player who understood exactly how much these nights matter. If you have enjoyed the madness of this tie, by the way, drop your thoughts, because this was one of those games people are going to argue about for days. And honestly, that is half the fun of football, apart from the emotional damage and the occasional need for a lie-down. Lamine Yamal deserves his own section too, because his game was almost a miniature version of Barcelona's night. There was the brilliance, the invention, the daring movement into central spaces, the quality in the combinations, the assist, the pre-assist, the penalty. And there was also the carelessness, the unnecessary risk, the reminder that for all his gifts, he is still capable of making the sort of decision that makes everyone around him age a little bit. But that is the trade-off. You take the danger because the danger he creates is worth it. He was much better than in the first leg. Not perfect, but influential, expressive, and impossible to ignore. Then there is Gerard Martin, who quietly had a huge role in this match. Intelligent in the second goal, excellent in the build-up to the fourth, composed in possession, progressive with his passing. In a game with 7 Barcelona goals and all the noise that comes with that, it would be easy for a performance like his to get buried under the flashier names. It should not. He helped give the game shape when it needed shape. And then there are the warning signs, because even on a euphoric night, you cannot pretend they are not there. Barcelona still looked too vulnerable in transition. They still allowed the same spaces to be targeted too easily. Cancelo, in particular, had a rough defensive night. Going forward, you can see why he tempts coaches. He gives width, movement, combinations, and attacking freedom. But when Barcelona were being attacked down that side, it was chaotic. He lost runners, got exposed repeatedly, and Newcastle kept going there because the invitation was obvious. The injury concern around Joan Garcia also hangs over everything. That is the shadow under the celebration. The way he came off, the way he was holding himself, that matters. Because on nights like this, when the goals are flying in and the crowd is riding every wave, it is easy to forget how thin the margin can be between confidence and crisis. If that injury is serious, it changes the emotional temperature around Barcelona very quickly. Still, none of that should take away from what this night was. This was exhilarating. This was ridiculous. This was a Champions League knockout match that somehow managed to be tense, funny, dramatic, controversial, and completely lopsided all at once. Newcastle had their moments, they really did. But once Barcelona found top gear after the break, the gap in belief and execution became enormous. And that bigger picture matters now. Barcelona are through to the quarterfinals, and they have done it in a way that sends a message. Not a neat little statement crafted for headlines, but a proper football message. The sort that arrives through noise and goals and opponents collapsing under pressure. They are not flawless, they are not stable enough to trust without reservation, but they are dangerous. They are alive. And on a night like this, they looked like a team capable of blowing a tie open in a way very few sides can. That is why the emotion around this result feels so strong. It was not simply victory. It was vindication, release, and a bit of mischief all rolled into one. Barcelona did not just go through. They turned the whole evening into an event. They gave their supporters terror and joy, often within the same passage of play. They reminded everyone that football is at its best when it resists neat explanations and chooses spectacle instead. By the final whistle, the scoreline looked almost absurd, like the sort of thing you read twice just to make sure your eyes are not trolling you. 7-2 on the night. 8-3 on aggregate. Against a team that arrived with reputation, with noise, with talk around the strength of the league they came from. And Barcelona answered all of it, the loud way. Not with a clean, polished masterpiece. Something better than that, something alive, something volatile, something unforgettable. This has been Across the Pitch. Over and out.